What's up YouTube? Jeff back again from DopeTechDaily.com. Today I'm bringing you guys a comparison of the Samsung Galaxy Tab S3, which I have right here. I just did an unboxing of this guy a couple days ago, so if you haven't checked out my unboxing of the Tab S3, I'll drop the link below if you want to check that out. This is the latest tablet from Samsung. Got a glass back here, very similar to their phone display type style. Also has a Super AMOLED display around front here. Very, very beautiful display. We'll talk about that in a little bit more in a second. And then here I also have next to it the 2016 iPad Pro. This is the 9.7-inch iPad Pro. Obviously, I also have the 12.9, which actually I'm selling right now over on Swappa. So if you're interested in picking one up, you can check that out. Has the metal back. This is the space gray variant. So I want to give you guys a rundown comparison of these two in some key areas. And the first thing I want to talk about is the build quality and design of each device. Obviously, as you guys just saw in my rundown, you've got a metal back here, aluminum back here on the iPad Pro. You've got a glass back on the Samsung Galaxy Tab S3. And now me personally, in using the Tab S3 for a few days, I don't know if you guys can see, it picks up fingerprints very, very quickly. I wiped it off before I started the video. I kind of prefer the metal back, the aluminum back here on the iPad. It certainly looks prettier with the glass back, but of course you're going to get those fingerprints. You're going to be wiping it down constantly. Otherwise, they have the same exact display size here on the front, 9.7 inches. They have pretty much the same pixel density as well. The main difference, of course, if you look, the tablets is a little bit in terms of where things are situated, but that's also very similar. If you look on the side, you've got these pen connectors. That is for a keyboard attachment. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Both of these have a keyboard attachment. If you look over on the side here, you'll see that the Samsung Tab S3 on the side, it's got its volume button. It's also got its power button. The iPad only has volume buttons because, of course, the power button for the iPad is right there on the top. Another thing that you'll notice that they have in common with their design is they both got these quad speakers right here, as you can see on the top. And then also if I flip them over, you can see they've also both got two speakers on the bottom. The Samsung Tab S3 does have USB Type-C, whereas the iPad Pro has the Lightning cable, of course. They both have a headphone jack. The Samsung Tab S3 has its headphone jack here on the bottom right next to the Type-C port, and the iPad Pro has its headphone jack there on the top. So very similar in terms of build, just a little bit difference in where things are situated in terms of the ports, etc. on the tablets, but they're very similar overall in terms of their build quality. Again, one thing I prefer is I just prefer the metal back because it sort of diminishes the fingerprints a little bit. Both of them are very, very premium. Both feel great in hand. They're very similar in terms of their weight. They're also very similar in terms of their dimensions and thickness. The next thing I want to talk about is the display. Now for these, I'll just do them sort of one at a time so you guys can get a idea of the display. Again, the Samsung Tab S3 has the Super AMOLED display from Samsung. Very, very beautiful. I got to be honest and say this is the best display I've ever seen on a mobile device. Overall, the blacks are incredibly black on this display. The colors are so vivid, better than I've seen on any other Samsung device, and the viewing angles are crazy. You can literally view the screen on this from almost a completely flat sort of viewing angle. You can still see the color on the screen if I hold it completely parallel with the camera, which is pretty insane. The brightness on it gets so bright that you can literally blind yourself from the brightness on the Tab S3. Now that being said, the colors on here are very, very saturated. You do get HDR video capability on the Samsung Galaxy Tab S3. There's not a lot of video out there right now that supports HDR, but you do have that functionality, and that does future-proof it somewhat, which is certainly nice. Over here on the iPad Pro, the same exact resolution here. You do have an LCD display. You do have wide color gamut support, and you do have Apple's True Tone display, which I do have turned on right now. So if you go into the display settings, you can see True Tone is turned on. If you turn that off, you get a little bit more bluish color, which is a little more comparable to what you would see on something like the Tab S3. Now, obviously, the big difference here is the AMOLED versus the LCD display. In my opinion, the LCD display, especially with True Tone technology turned on, does give you truer colors, but the Samsung display gives you colors that are more pleasing to the eye. It's just a fact that humans prefer those really saturated colors. They're not a huge fan of accurate displays, whether or not technology enthusiasts and blogs want to convince us that we need accurate displays or not. Humans just prefer that sort of saturated look on the AMOLED panel, and that's what you're going to get from Samsung, as we always do. A couple other things to talk about in terms of the overall features. These both do have fingerprint scanners here. The Samsung has the fingerprint scanner built into the home button, this traditional physical home button. It's also got capacitive keys on the side, not on-screen keys, which is disappointing for some people. I will say the fingerprint scanner on this tablet is not quite as good as the one on Samsung's last generation of phones in my experience. So far, I've had a couple times where it's failed to recognize my print. Now that could be just taking some time to get adjusted to the prints and learning. It has gotten a little bit better, but that's something to mention. I would say that Touch ID in general here on the iPad Pro is quite a bit faster and a little more accurate than the one I've seen so far on the Galaxy Tab S3. So overall, you do have two very nice displays, one that's a little more accurate, the one that has a little more punchy colors in the Samsung. Just depends on what you prefer. You do have that HDR video capability. Both of them are 4K video capable as well. So really, really nice display technology in both of these tablets. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is the battery life. So the battery life on both of these, they have pretty big batteries because they're tablets. Of course, in the Samsung Tab S3, if you take a look at the spec sheet, you got a 6,000 milliamp hour battery. So far, I've went through 2 charge cycles on here, and I can tell you, you're not going to get the best battery life in the world out of this tablet. That's generally been the case in my experience with most Samsung tablets in the past as well. So if you go into the battery here, I can show you guys what sort of battery life I'm experiencing so far on this charge cycle. We go into battery usage, they kind of make it hard to find the exact information you're looking for. You can see right there, this charge cycle that I've been on right now, 42 hours and 46 minutes ago. I have had it idle for quite a bit on this charge cycle. This is my second cycle on using the tablet. So far I would say on an average cycle you might get 6 to 7 hours of screen on time. If you're watching a lot of media, if you're just doing web browsing, you probably get between 8 to 8.5 hours if you're just doing web browsing, some other light tasks. But if you're watching a lot of media, I don't know, listening to audio, playing games at the same time, it's going to be right around 8 hours. On the other hand, with the iPad Pro, in my experience, this tablet is a battery champ. Of course, Apple also doesn't really give us that great of battery stats. You can go in here. I just recharged the iPad Pro. The usage on this, of course, includes the usage time doing anything, not just screen on time, which is a little bit different when it comes to iOS devices. But in my opinion, I do get around the 10 hours that Apple claims that you're going to get from the iPad Pro. So when it comes to the head-to-head battery comparison, I would definitely say you're going to get a longer usage out of the iPad Pro. And also, especially when it comes to standby time, iOS just happens to be much better than Android when it comes to standby battery. And that's pretty much for phones, tablets, or anything that you're going to experience. That really has to do with the operating system for now. The next thing I want to talk about is the productivity and the feature set in both of these tablets. Now, both of them, as I mentioned, they do have this place to put a keyboard dock right here. The keyboard attachment's about $130 for both of these. So if you do want to get the included keyboard, it's going to run you some extra money. Both of the tablets are right around $600. I believe the iPad Pro is $579 right now. The Tab S3 launched at $599. If you do get the keyboard attachment, that's going to run you another $130, pushing both of these tablets upwards of $700. Now, I haven't got the keyboard attachment yet for the Tab S3, but I have used the one with my iPad Pro and with my 12.9-inch iPad Pro. It definitely adds to your productivity overall. If you do want to do some actual work on this tablet, it's going to make it a lot easier if you happen to have the keyboard attachment as well. If you have that, it's going to make it easier to use the multi-window features, compose emails, and do anything else you might need to do for work. So just keep in mind that extra $130 is going to be something to factor into your purchasing decision. One thing to consider in addition to the keyboard attachments are the 2 writing instruments available with each tablet. The S Pen here at the top is bundled with the Galaxy Tab S3 for the $599 price point of the tablet, while the Apple Pencil, which is here on the bottom, is actually a $99 add-on if you want to use that with the iPad Pro. Now, some of the advantages here, the Apple Pencil is more precise. Up to a single pixel can be modified with the pencil, and you can use this for very detailed art if you're into that sort of thing, drawing, sketching, etc. Some very impressive digital art has been created by people using the Apple Pencil. On the other hand, the S Pen is included with the Tab S3, which means it's no additional cost to you if you're just interested in taking quick notes, for instance, a student taking notes in class. And also, the software is very tightly integrated with the S Pen. The S Pen has a little click button here which you can activate as several options within the actual software. You can also use it to write notes when the screen is off, etc. The Apple Pencil also has several apps available on iOS which you can use to take notes and do digital art, but some of those are an extra cost. I believe Samsung has a little bit tighter integration and apps available with the S Pen right out of the box. So just to show you what I mean in terms of using the S Pen right out of the box with the Tab S3, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the options that are available. You guys saw right there the fingerprint failed to recognize my fingerprint 5 times. I was talking about that earlier. If you click the button right here on the side of the S Pen, you'll bring up the S Pen options on your Tab S3. You've got Create Note, View All Notes, Smart Select, Screen Write, and Glance. You can also add any shortcuts that you want. If you go ahead and click here, you can add any shortcut, for instance, photos. If I want to edit photos with my S Pen, I can click that. It's going to add that right over here to my options. You can see I can add another app if I want to add, say, Pocket Cast. I haven't installed Instagram on here yet, but that's one of my favorite ones to add with my S Pen options. And then when I click the wheel here, you'll see that once again my apps will show up there, photos, and it sort of spins over here, which is a nice feature. Now you can add even more apps if you want to use various things with the S Pen. Personally, I really like the tight integration with the S Pen and the Tab S3. The one thing that's a big downside now is the S Pen doesn't actually slide in the tablet like it did with the Note phones. So now you got to keep up with this. It does have a clip on it, and also if you buy the keyboard case, there's a place to slide the tablet inside the case, or you could put it in a pencil case, etc. Of course, you'll have the same exact issue with the Apple Pencil. The Apple Pencil is great, and you can use it with several apps on your iPad. I do have some apps here that support it. For instance, MuPad here, you can see if you want to use MuPad, I think my Apple Pencil may actually not be charged, but you can use MuPad, several other note-taking apps with the Apple Pencil. I would say overall, if you're into the precision, if you're into the art side of things, the Apple Pencil is certainly a nicer choice. It also has nicer balance in the hand when you're writing, so I definitely prefer the Apple Pencil if you're going to be taking notes for a long period of time or doing art. But keep in mind, it is that extra $99 charge, so that is something to factor into the overall price value consideration, which I'll talk about at the very end of the video. So those are the accessories that are available with the Tab S3 and also with the iPad. Talk a little bit more about the productivity of both of these devices. Both of them do have split screen multitasking, so if you open up the Samsung Tab S3, the way to activate your split screen multitasking, say you've got an app open like Gmail and you want to open another app like Facebook, they open side by side like this. That's controlled using the recents key. You can thumb through them. You'll notice that some apps, though, like Facebook, will try to force sort of the multi-screen mode when they don't actually support it. You can see right here, Facebook does a terrible job, and it's actually a crappy experience. The thing about multitasking on the iPad is that even though some apps don't support it, it's not going to try to force it and look really strange. For instance, if I open up Tweetbot and then I want to open up something else, say Dropbox here, I can literally just slide this over, and now I've got a nice split screen view, and it only lets me choose apps which actually support the mode. So split screen multitasking, in my opinion, is great on both. The only thing is, on iOS, there's a lot more apps that support it sort of natively because developers on iOS are a little more invested into the tablet ecosystem, and that is mainly because of the success of the iPad, whereas on Android, of course, there aren't as many successful tablets. So that's also something to think about when you're thinking about multitasking. The iPad has more apps that natively support that split screen multitasking than you're going to get on the Samsung Tab S3. So if you're really into the multitasking game and you want to use this for productivity, that's definitely something to keep in mind. The next thing, of course, is to talk about updates on these two tablets. Now, of course, iOS is notorious in a good way for updating all of their devices sort of at once. And so the nice thing about that, of course, is that you're going to have the latest, greatest operating system on the iPad whenever Apple releases a new operating system. On Samsung Tab S3, on the other hand, Samsung has had a habit in the past of forgetting about their tablets and only updating their phones. Even with their phones, they don't update them as frequently as most people would like. So if you want to think about getting updates, the iPad is probably the better of the two because you know you're going to receive the latest and greatest version of iOS for a long, long time to come. The next thing is performance. Now, so far, I've ran some benchmarks in the Tab S3, which I posted over on Twitter. I don't really want to talk about the benchmarks because benchmarks don't tell the whole story. The Snapdragon 820 seems very, very fast so far, very fluid. I played some Super Mario Run on here. I've played several different games on here so far. It's been a good experience overall. And of course, time's only the only factor that's going to really tell us how well this tablet performs. It definitely takes some time with the Snapdragon 820 and Samsung software to sort of get all the apps in there and see what happens once you have all those loaded up. So I'll revisit that in a few months. But what I can tell you about the iPad Pro is that the iPad Pro with Apple's A9X is incredibly fast, and this thing has not slowed down. I've been using it as my main tablet for a year. It's definitely a champ. So in terms of performance and reliability, just because of the tight integration of the software and hardware, I probably have to give the slight advantage here to the iPad just for the fact that you know you're always going to have the latest software, you know it's going to be integrated because the hardware is made by the same company that's updating the software, and that leads to a buttery smooth performance on this particular tablet. The next thing I want to talk about is the speaker quality. Now the speakers here on both, as I said before, you've got a total of 4 speakers on the bottom, 2 on the bottom, and 2 on the top of each tablet. Now I've tested out both of these speakers. Both of the sets of speakers are quite loud. You do get a sort of a surround sound feel from them. But in terms of the clarity, I have to say, so far I prefer the iPad. I think the Samsung Tab S3 might be a bit louder. I can try to do a detailed sound test, but I can tell you in some preliminary experiments that the clarity advantage goes to the iPad, while the Samsung Tab S3 appears to have louder sound. So if you're trying to watch videos or Netflix or anything like that where you need to understand what is being said, the iPad might be preferable. If you're really going to listen to music on your tablet, then you might want the Samsung Tab S3. Overall, I would say both of these are very impressive. I don't want to talk too much about cameras because I'm not the kind of guy who takes a lot of pictures with his tablet. I think it's kind of a strange thing to do. Both of them have decent cameras. The Samsung's camera is not quite as good, in my opinion, as the iPad's. I took a few pictures with both. It's not something I generally do. I would say the Samsung pictures look a little bit muddy, so if you're really into taking pictures with your tablet, you might take that into consideration. But then again, the iPad also doesn't have the most amazing camera. The camera is basically at the level of an iPhone 5. You're going to be able to take some decent photos if you just need to snap a quick pic, but for anything better, you're going to want to use your phone or a camera. So at the end of the day, which of these should you buy? It really comes down to the operating system you prefer and what it is that you value. If you're just consuming media and that's your primary purpose, I think the amazing Super AMOLED display on the Samsung Tab S3 will probably serve you best. And if you like the freedom of Android, that's going to be the way to go. If you really need that great multitasking, fluid performance, also with the most amount of pro apps available on the iOS App Store, you're probably going to want to go with the iPad just because you know this is going to be updated to the latest and greatest OS. You're going to have that fast, fluid performance for a long time, and you have a large amount of available apps to go along with it. In addition, if you're an artist, you're definitely going to prefer the iPad Pro because the Apple Pencil has that higher level of precision. Alright guys, so that is my final recommendation. Both of them are great tablets. Comes down to your needs and also, of course, whether or not you prefer Android versus iOS. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, which one of these two tablets you prefer. You can find me at dopetechdaily.com, Google+, Instagram, and Twitter at the links in the description. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. I appreciate you guys checking out this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot for watching.